Nowhere for the pain to hide.
If you're running a lab or treating patients today, you've likely spent your career looking at aging through the classic lens of mechanical wear and tear. You know, the old idea that the body is essentially just a machine that slowly rusts out and breaks down over time. But today, we're diving into a fundamentally different and honestly far more profound framework called Logos Life Medicine, or LLM. We are officially moving away from simple mechanics and stepping into the rigorous physics of information inference. We're going to start treating biological stability as a strict engineering challenge. So, let's quickly map out how we're going to unpack this thermodynamic challenge today. We'll start with aging as information collapse, then look at the pathology of the dark genome, followed by the metrology of chaos. From there, we'll hit the central conductor, our neuroendocrine control, before diving into the hierarchy of interventions and reprogramming, and finally, overcoming the thermodynamic barrier.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, aging as information collapse.
First things first, we really need to discard that outdated model of aging as just the accumulation of damage. When we frame this through information theory and physics, aging is actually an irreversible growth of stochastic noise. Think of a biological system like a highly tuned computational interface. As entropy increases, this stochastic random noise just grows exponentially, and eventually it completely drowns out the organism's high-level regulatory signals. So it's not just physical wear, it is quite literally an information collapse, plain and simple. And that brings us to this absolutely critical bifurcation point on the screen. Imagine a biological system humming along perfectly in dynamic equilibrium. That's your standard juvenile profile. But then, it hits a critical phase transition within its excitable medium. This is exactly where localized issues, like the senescence-associated secretory phenotype, or SASP as we all know it, coalesce into this chronic, self-sustaining, inflammaging loop. Entropy spikes, coherence is lost. It's a fundamental phase shift for the whole system. Moving right along to Section 2, the pathology of the dark genome. Let's look at the actual biological software here and the threat of the so-called dark genome. In a youthful state, we know proteins like SIRT6 and lamin A do a fantastic job strictly locking down retrotransposons. But as stochastic noise accumulates, SIRT6 gets, well, distracted from its epigenetic silencing duties. And what happens? Line 1 retrotransposons wake up. Their cDNA spills right into the cytoplasm, and the cell misinterprets this as an exogenous viral infection. This triggers a massive false viral alarm via the C-gas sting pathway, unleashing profound sterile inflammation. So aging here is essentially an internal, genetically determined autoimmune reaction to our very own self-mobile elements. Wild, right? And it gets even more complex when we look at the hardware level, specifically protein clearance. We see a fascinating proteostasis dimorphism that is actually hidden in the X chromosome. The degradation of the LAMP2A receptor leads to a serious loss of chaperone-mediated autophagy, or CMA, specificity, because females have higher basal levels of LAMP2A expression that targets presynaptic clearance, while males have a much more vulnerable translocation pathway targeting postsynaptic clearance. We end up seeing dramatically different trajectories for cognitive decline. The major takeaway for your clinical practice? Any therapeutic intervention here absolutely must be individually calibrated by gender. No way around it.
Okay, Section 3, metrology of chaos, diagnosing noise.
Now, if we're going to engineer a solution, we first have to mathematically measure and delineate between two very different types of biological noise. First, we have green dynamic noise. These are reversible oscillations, think metabolic fluctuations, or a transient glucose spike. The system's autocorrelation function naturally tends back toward balance. But then we have red stochastic noise. This is the irreversible, strictly linear growth of configurational entropy. It represents growth that is completely uncorrelated between sites. And mathematically speaking, it's this red noise that strictly defines our hard, absolute 120-year thermodynamic limit. Looking at the Fetichev matrix here, it gives us a really stark warning about a critical error happening in modern biogerontology. Traditional biohacking, diet, standard supplements, even metformin, they really only treat the green noise. Sure, they stabilize reversible damage, but to actually punch through that 120-year thermodynamic barrier, we require direct programmatic control over the red stochastic entropy. We literally have to change the system's effective temperature through structural rewriting. That leads us nicely into Section 4, the central conductor, neuroendocrine control. As you know, the brain is the ultimate predictor of systemic mortality. When we track what's called the synaptic signature, the timeline is pretty terrifying.
Fully 15 years before clinical amnesia ever presents, systemic coherence is already starting to fail. We see perineuronal net proteins actively degrading in blood plasma. Fast forward to -5 years, and we're seeing actual structural changes on an MRI. By year 0, the hardware has completely collapsed.
So this synaptic signature acts as a highly precise molecular sensor for the system's memory of damage. It is proof that the narrowing of our regulatory control horizons is recorded as a massive drop in the bandwidth of our neuroendocrine information channel, decades before a patient ever reports symptoms. Essentially, the central conductor just loses its ability to suppress stochastic noise out on the periphery.
Let's transition to Section 5, Hierarchy of Interventions and Reprogramming. Here is where we get into the brilliant concept of cogniceuticals. Now, don't mistake this for mere psychology. This is precise top-down thermodynamic technology. It starts by imposing a structured infinite goal on the system. This acts exactly like a Maxwell's demon, where the brain actively sorts and reduces the effective temperature of configurational entropy. This cognitive load forces a massive physiological response. It activates vagus nerve tone and upregulates chaperone-mediated autophagy, which ultimately achieves systemic stability by blocking that exact line 1 viral pathology we discussed a few slides ago.
By deliberately imposing this high-level cognitive flow state, we are forcing the biological organism to remember its anatomical purpose. We are actively expanding the cognitive cone. Why does that matter? Because it completely prevents individual cells from dropping their informational vectors and slipping into the kind of cellular egoism that directly drives senescence and oncology.
Clinically speaking, we architect this systemic stability through 3 distinct tiers. Level 1 interventions are metabolic and basal. This is where things like rapamycin and caloric restriction come in to reduce the amplitude of that reversible green noise. Level 2 is regulatory, deploying senolytics and CMA activators to actually clean up the SASP and restore local epigenetics. But Level 3 is the absolute frontier. Informational reset. This is where we use cogniceuticals and epigenetic reprogramming to directly tackle and reduce the temperature of the irreversible red noise.
And when we talk about epigenetic reprogramming, or ERA, via OSKM induction, the timing is everything. There is a strict critical window precisely between days 3 and 13. During this phase, methylation age successfully drops, but the somatic identity of the cell is completely preserved. However, if we push past day 13 into the danger zone, the cell collapses into pluripotency, and you get teratomas. Hitting that exact window lets us achieve a partial epi-rollback, resetting the stochastic noise without fatally formatting the somatic cell's hard drive.
The IDOS matrix you see here visually unifies all these diverse tools into one cohesive systems biology approach. We're talking about everything from targeting basic metabolic pathways at the foundation, all the way up to utilizing deep learning designed molecules and transcriptomics AI to assert direct, top-down control over biological inference. It's essentially building a fully integrated pyramid of systemic resilience.
Finally, let's bring it all together with Section 6, Overcoming the Thermodynamic Barrier.
This synthesis right here is the true core of Logos Life Medicine. The LLM matrix connects the metrics of Logos, so our AI aging clocks and precise noise measurements, with the physical biological hardware of life, like barrier protections and proteostasis. And medicine is the intervention that bridges them. The key takeaway here: we are no longer just putting band-aids on the localized consequences of biological failures. We are actively restoring programmatic, software-level control over the entire biological matrix.
As this concluding quote so perfectly captures, aging really is just the loss of informational coherence. Beating the Hayflick limit and shattering that 120-year thermodynamic barrier, it's no longer some untouchable mystery of nature. It's a rigorous engineering task. Time only becomes our ally when we take definitive control of biological inference and perfectly synchronize the epigenome software with the proteome's hardware.
So we've traveled from the fundamental physics of entropy all the way to the absolute clinical frontiers of epigenetic reprogramming. I want to leave you with a question to chew on as you head back to your labs and clinics. How will you integrate the physics of biological inference to rewrite the human limits in your own practice? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I genuinely look forward to seeing how you all shape the future of medicine.
protocol is empathy, a living pulse in every node, architecture for the soul to be.